I probably expect somewhere in the order of a 10 to 15% correction sometime next year.
Welcome. Is the US technology sector in a bubble?
Look, I think it's too complicated to say yes or no to that question. As you said, it's risen a lot, but let's compare it to the sort of dot-com boom. That was a 268% rise from the bottom. And if you look at valuations as well, so looking at the price to earnings ratio of the top 7 stocks right now, the Magnificent 7, that's only at 23 times ex Tesla. If you take 2000 and look at the top 7 companies, which included Intel and Cisco and Nortel at the time, that was at 63 times. So look, valuations are stretched, but I wouldn't say that they are crazy like in the dot-com days.
Well, look, several big tech companies are now funding their capital expenditure with debt instead of their own free cash. Now, do you see a problem with this?
Look, I would if it wasn't backed by real revenue, earnings, and free cash flows. So, you take, again, the Magnificent 7, they have $2 billion in cash on their balance sheet. They make $2 trillion of revenues per annum, and they have $20 trillion in market cap altogether. Now, I think that that's a pretty good basis for being able to pay that debt. So yes, while I think generally ballooning debt levels are concerning, you're seeing that backing there with real revenue and earnings.
But you have to ask yourself the question as well, though, if the debt is needed and what happens if the expansion isn't followed through with real earnings on top of that debt.
I think that we have an interesting insight into this because of what we do. So we use AI to basically drive all the fundamental processes of our fund. And I can easily see me 1000xing my use of tokens or AI and large language models over the next year. And if I can 1000x my usage and I'm at the forefront of this, it stands to reason that everyone else is behind, so that can catch up.
And indeed, the Magnificent 7 combined have hundreds of billions of dollars in cash sitting on their balance sheet, and they make trillions in revenue. So their fundamentals are solid. Surely, if their prices come under pressure, it won't be in any major way?
Look, I don't think so. I don't think it's incorrect to assume that there will be some sort of pullback, and I think you'll see some general volatility as this narrative plays out. And I think the adoption cycle is hard to ascertain over the next sort of, call it medium term, so next 2 to 3 years. So I think you'll see swings and roundabouts there. I probably expect somewhere in the order of a 10 to 15% correction sometime next year, but I don't think that we're going to see sustained levels of downturn. I think you're going to see that go back up.
In the event of a crash or even just underperformance of one or two main players, could that spark a contagion through the entire sector?
I think that what you'll see is the market start to be more discerning around which AI software plays are better than others.
Why haven't the markets been discerning, to use your word, yet?
I think that there's a bit of a baby thrown out with the bathwater case. So I think the kind of general story has been, oh, there's all this vibe coding going on. Everyone's going to become a developer. No one needs these specialized software plays anymore. But I don't know if you have tried to code yourself on these platforms. I certainly have. I have no developer experience, and it's actually still very hard to build anything meaningful. So I think what you'll see is people play around with these tools and then use other tools to help them. I mean, Atlassian is a case in point. It's I think it's down something like 50% over the past year. And Atlassian makes tools for developers. And the kind of underlying threat that people think there is that there will be less developers than more developers because everyone will be vibe coding. But if everyone is developing, that just means there's more developers in the world, so their usage base should increase. And actually, what you've seen so far is that their customers that use these vibe coding tools, they've actually seen an increase in Atlassian seats.
There is one question I'm very keen to get your response, though. Is there potential for a black swan event in the US tech sector? And if there was, what would that look like?
Unlike, 2009 and other black swan events, there's not this sort of high leverage in the market. I mean, you mentioned Danny Dimon before, and he's talking about some concerns around the private credit market, but we aren't seeing those levels of, distressed debt that we've seen in other black swan events of the past.
Okay, Armina Rosenberg, thank you very much for joining the business.
No worries, thank you.